Good afternoon and welcome to this Facebook Live with Americans for Prosperity, Texas. I'm your host, Mac Morris, the Deputy State Director here in the great state of Texas. Today, I'm joined by the great Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne from TX24. We're going to be talking about infrastructure and all that wasteful spending that you hear from President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer. So we're going to have a great conversation because Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne sits on transportation and infrastructure, so she knows a lot about that. She has a history of being the mayor of Irving and working at HUD, so she knows what it's like to work with budgets and what how things really play out in the government. So Congresswoman, we're grateful to have you because your district is just sprawling. DFW suburbs of Northwest Dallas County into Tarrant County, a little bit of Denton. You got the airport, lots of highways. So let's jump right into this. Let's talk infrastructure. I'm going to send it over to you.
Well, I appreciate that. As you mentioned, I was mayor of Irving for 6 years, one of the largest, 92nd largest city in the country. DFW airport's right here. I was on the city council for 6 years, and then I worked at HUD, kind of inside the belly of the federal beast, if you will. But during my time as mayor, I concentrated on transportation. This area was built and developed around transportation. That's what allows all of these businesses, these Fortune 500 companies, to move here, and all these small and pop shops that actually work with those Fortune 500 companies to be able to thrive. So when I was elected, that was one of the committees that I fought to get on. We have more aviation employees in Texas 24 than any other congressional district in the country. You think about American Airlines, think about Southwest Airlines, everybody is right here. And that has been my focus, is to make sure it's not sexy. It's not something that you're going to read about in the headlines. But, we need to build roads. We need to make sure that our bridges are not crumbling. We need to make sure that the $10 billion in deferred maintenance at DFW Airport is addressed. And so it's practical, it's pragmatic. We used to have a saying when I was mayor, you don't have a Democrat or a Republican pothole, right? I mean, pothole's a pothole, it needs to be filled. You're going to get that call when you're mayor. That those are the things that I think we need to be concentrating on and focused on. Unfortunately, what we've seen in the last several months, this bill that came out of the current administration it's a train wreck. 3/4 of it, so 3 out of 4 of every dollars that we're talking about spending has nothing really to do with traditional infrastructure. It's not roads, it's not bridges. 6% are roads and bridges, and the rest is I call it the Green New Deal phase 1. We're picking winners and losers. It's $178 billion dedicated toward electronic vehicle stations, which, again, we don't even know if that is what the future. And by the time, trust me, by the time the government builds it, there will probably be old and outdated anyway. But we're not focused on opening the economy back up. And after what we've seen over the last year, that needs to be the focus. In addition to the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, I'm also on small business. I'm the ranking member for oversight on small business. And I've been talking to people all across this district, honestly, all across this country, and what they need to be able to open back up. And I'll tell you, they are fighting to get workers, having to compete with the overextended, overly generous benefits of the federal government is not easy. They're having a hard time because people are being paid to stay at home instead of going to work. And that has a flip effect. If you think about all of the canisters that we can't get off the ships right now on the West Coast because dock workers are being paid more to stay home than they would be able to do their job, you can see how that has a domino effect on industries across the country, and quite honestly, all directly in all of our lives. The spend that we've seen over the last few months is not sustainable. It's resulting in lower economic development than we need. It's also it's equating to huge amounts of inflation that we've got right now. And I don't care who you are, you're going to be paying more at the pump, you're going to be paying more at the grocery store, you're going to be paying more in restaurants. And my job is to get there, to be very vocal, to have a backbone, and to fight these things when I have an opportunity. So you'll see me on the floor. But quite honestly, I want to hear about what you think, what you want to have in your representative government, what you're expecting Congress to be able to accomplish, and what kind of questions and priorities you have that I can be helpful in helping answer.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. When we think about, there's been $6 trillion spent on COVID relief, and President Biden initially proposed $4 trillion in this infrastructure bill. Now they come up with this bipartisan reforms that they can deal with things. And then Bernie Sanders is saying $6 trillion for human infrastructure. What are really these amounts? Because it keeps, we keep seeing that there's really what, 5% going to roads and bridges. Where's all this money going to? You talked about the new Green Deal as well.
Well, I mean, that's what, if you look at the $178 billion that they're spending on EV stations, we're now considering human infrastructure for schools that aren't going to be getting it, for a number of years. That's not part of a COVID relief plan. It's not part of infrastructure. It's not part of what is going to help open the economy. It's increasing debt. It is definitely pandering to the far left extremists of the Democrat Party. But even if a bill is passed, we need to make sure that it has included the necessary infrastructure to make us globally competitive, to make sure that we can get goods from one side of the country to another. And when I say goods, it's not just, the cool things that you order on Amazon. It's things like food. It's things like medicine, medical supplies. It's costly right now for our country not to be focused on that. But those projects that we have to have that are necessary, that are on the board right now to be replaced, those crumbling roads, those dangerous bridges, those aren't going away. So while we may continue to creep up our debt and add these multi-trillion-dollar packages, other than just causing inflation, other than causing more debt, other than causing least efficiency in government, adding all these additional regulations, which, by the way, this bill does in spades, we're not addressing the needs that are going to be necessary for not only just our quality of life, but also for our national security.
Well, thank you. And remind folks who are joining this Facebook Live right now, we're sitting down with Congressman Beth Van Duyne, talk about infrastructure. We want to direct folks, if you want to contact your member of Congress, your senator, to make your voice heard to end this wasteful spending, go to stopthespendingspree.com. It's an easy way to really bolster your voice, tell your congressman or woman exactly how you feel about this bill and wasteful spending in DC. But Congressman, I want to get back to you. In Texas, we have, in our legislative session, we have fiscally responsible budgets. How come, you've been up there in DC now, how is it that DC can't balance their budget and their spending? It just seems just insane when they're talking about $4 trillion more and adding even more trillions in a budget later this year.
And I understand, being a mayor and being a city council member is much different than looking at Congress. You think about a budget that we have at the city versus the budget that we have at the federal level, it's much different. But it's not really, the basic points are still the same. And by law, we had to pass a balanced budget every year at the city level in Texas. So I have passed 12 balanced budgets, and it's hard because you actually have to pick and choose what is a priority, what do we have to have versus want to still have to pay off, make sure that you pay for roads locally, for access, for your police, for your fire, for your sidewalks. You have to budget in the things that you have to have. And if there's anything over, you budget above and beyond. Or you could give things like, tax breaks so that everybody has those dollars in their pockets to be able to put back and to spend as they would prefer. But the federal government, we really don't seem to have, we don't have that law.
We may have lost the congressman, or maybe my congresswoman, where my signal's gone out as well. We're going to wait for her to jump right back on here. Just a moment, please.
Well, that was interesting. Did I say something that offended? Did I get kicked out?
No, we got you back. If we'll get your camera switched back around and we'll get back to it. Thank you, Congresswoman. I think if you tilt your camera back around, it's a 90-degree angle. There we go. We're good to go again. Well, we were just discussing balanced budgets. You had to do that at the local level, state level needs to do that. Federal level, we hope they would do that. But I want to jump into, we've heard about the new bipartisan infrastructure bill. And now all members are at home now. I remember Speaker Pelosi said we'd pass an infrastructure bill by July 4th. What is it, July 8th now? That didn't happen. Now members are home like yourself. People are working in the districts, senators as well. What does it look like going in? You're going to go back to DC in a couple of weeks. What's it going to look like when it comes to an infrastructure debate? Are we going to see something pass, or are we going to see something watered down? Because I think Texans are really worried about just a lot more spending that they really don't think they can afford.
Well, I mean, it's a great question. It's right now it's going to be in the hands of the Senate, and we're going to see what they bring us back. I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we had a 19-hour-long markup where Republicans tried to add 200 amendments, and none of them got voted up out of committee. Now, interesting enough, on the floor, my amendment, which was a completely bipartisan, shouldn't have been partisan at all, amendment that would have allowed municipalities more control over things like HOV lanes, that they could pay back federal dollars if their transportation progress had changed, if lanes had changed and they wanted to open those back up. For example, on US 75, we have found that people aren't using the HOV lane. So you could actually relieve a lot more congestion if you were to open it up. It would provide more funds into our general fund to be able to look at future projects, have money for those future projects. And it would also allow local elected officials to be able to have more control over their traffic patterns and traffic flow. It should have been nonpartisan, but I had our chairman fight me on it. It ended up passing. That amendment ended up passing. We had 41 Democrats cross over and vote for that when it was on the floor of the House. All of that's now going to the Senate. We've had 20 senators, bipartisan senators, who have said we are going to fight for a bill. We want to have a transportation bill. We are looking at that as something that's necessary to be able to move forward with America. But all of them agree that they don't want to have a tax increase. Now, when you're talking about $1 trillion plus for a transportation bill, how are you going to pay for it? The House Republicans, we had come up with a bill that would have taken funds that have not already been spent on COVID relief to be able to move those funds over to be able to pay for transportation needs. That was mightily rejected from the administration and from the Democrats on the House side. Now we're moving into, on the Senate side, they are saying that they are rejecting any kind of tax increases, which the original bill out of that administration was an increase in the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. This does not include that. But we've also been told that they are not accepting of a gas tax increase. And they're not looking at being able to move funds from the CARES Act, from COVID relief, over. So the big question is, you can pass a bill, but how are you going to pay for it? And what projects are you going to look at? And those projects that are necessary right now to have funding and to have maintenance, are those the projects, or are you just going to be looking at your very far left extremist side of the Democrat Party and pleasing them with a transportation bill? Question is, right now we're going to wait to see what the Senate does, and when it comes back to the House, we potentially may have another look at it, where you get something that includes both sides of the House working on it.
Well, as you said, you also sit on the committee of small businesses. You're talking to small business people in your district. They make up the backbone of our economy. They're the lifeblood, on Main Street. Corporate tax rates, a lot of people think, corporations are going to pay a lot. They're not looking at small businesses could be facing greater taxes. Individual people run their businesses, taking care of their families. And you kind of illustrate, if they try raising taxes, this is going to be crushing coming out of an pandemic we just had. We're, coming back in Texas. You kind of illustrate that for people, how that's really going to affect them at the end of the day. Because it looks like the cost of goods are going up now.
I mean, inflation is skyrocketing right now, and in cost of goods, if you can get the goods, a lot of them are on back order, and it's going to be months. Looking at cars, for example, trying to get the chips over from China. An average new car has 9 chips. They're not going to be here till the end of the year. So you've got lots that normally have 800 new cars that now have 70. and they're having a hard time. They're having a hard time managing. But we have talked to small businesses across this area. We've had a number of different small business roundtables. I've had a number of different tours, and they'll all tell you the same thing. They're having a hard time hiring people. They're having to compete now with the extended unemployment, which thankfully, Governor Abbott in the state of Texas ended that in June 30th. But they're also looking at skyrocket inflation and the potential of corporate tax increases. Now, we had on SBA, we actually had a hearing, and we had the SBA administrator on one of our hearings. And I asked her the question, I said, looking at the financial policies that are coming out of the administration, what is the effect on small businesses? And she said, no, we're concentrating on large corporations. We're concentrating on individuals making more than 400,000. I said, I know that's what you're concentrating on, but we all know that it's going to have a trickle down domino effect on small businesses. Can you tell me what the effects are going to be on small businesses with the corporate tax rate increase? She couldn't answer that question. What's the effect on small businesses going to be with the proposed $15 minimum wage increase? She couldn't answer the question. I said, what about the cap gains, changes and the increases that we're seeing? She couldn't answer that question. And I said, you're the small business administrator. Your job is to protect, defend, and look out for small businesses. If you don't have the answers, if you are not advising this administration on these questions, who is? And she couldn't answer. So we followed up. We're trying to get more answers. I have introduced a bill that would at least make the SBA have to look at what the consequences are to small businesses with an increase of $15 to minimum wage. But the problem is that they are making these decisions based on their philosophical, very progressive principles, but they have no idea what the expenses are going to be. They don't know what the consequences are going to be, the long-term effects on businesses. And that should scare anybody who ever buys anything to think about what the cost increases are going to be. Or if you have a job, is your job going to be around? Because some of these small businesses that are talking about having to have these hefty wage increases are saying, we're not going to expand our footprint. We're not going to hire people. We may probably shrink our workforce, and we're going to be looking at technology to take the place. Or we're just not going to grow. Or worst case, we're going to have to close our doors. That's what I'm hearing from small businesses.
And that's really scary. That's why we're looking at the trillions of dollars you're going to spend. You said, they're looking at new Green Deal policies. I've heard talks about human infrastructure. I didn't know infrastructure was now home care nurses, child care. Can you kind of tell people back in Texas what this human infrastructure part was? Because I believe just a couple of weeks ago, President Biden had to walk it back. He said, I'm not signing the infrastructure bill, the physical, unless I get human infrastructure. What is human infrastructure? None of us really know.
Well, and don't ask me, because unfortunately the devils are in the details, and we haven't seen the bill. So we've just seen the proposal, but we haven't seen really a lot of the details that have yet to be defined. So we're looking at things like being able to take away a city's or incentivize cities right now to be able to take away zoning for single family homes. Now, having worked at HUD, I saw that firsthand, what a disaster that was. Having fought to get onto a city council and a campaign, people appreciate being able to buy a home. It's what creates generational wealth. It's what breaks the cycle of poverty. And we should be trying to get people into a single family home that gives them an opportunity to invest in something that they'll have, hopefully for generations, or at least for decades, that upon their retirement. But we're doing the exact opposite. We are pressing these communities to create more apartments and more density that the cities really are not equipped to be able to handle. But we are incentivizing cities, and in some cases in California already, they've passed laws that basically forbid zoning like that. And that's how they're looking at human infrastructure. That's just one example. And I wrote an op-ed piece in Fox last month talking about it. If you want to live out in the suburbs and you want to have a yard for your kids to play, you're not the enemy. That is not what this party is moving forward. And that's part of a transportation bill. It has no place in that at all. And, unfortunately, most people don't have the time to read a 1,000-page bill. They read what's in the top headlines, which, when you see on CNN, you see on MSNBC, it's all rosy and wonderful, but they're not reading the details in it and how it will affect each one of our lives. And it's a shame. Because if we really are interested in getting people out of poverty, we should be focused on those policies that would allow them to, get a job, be more in control of their future, empowering them with choices. And it seems that this administration is hell bent on anything but that. It is all a one size fits all government solution.
Yeah, it's something in Americans for Prosperity here in Texas. We fight against that one size fits all. We
Yeah.
want we want bottom up solutions. We want people to live the American dream, have opportunities, and that's where we need our congressmen, our congresswomen doing the right thing, our senators as well, to promote good policy. I want to remind folks who are tuning in right now, we're sitting down with Representative Beth Van Duyne from TX24. We've been talking about infrastructure, the economy, and I want to remind folks, go to stopthespendingspree.com. You can send an email to your congressman or congresswoman, as well as your two senators. Make sure you have your voice heard. This is a bill that keeps on going. It keeps the morphs in terms of spending, morphs in terms of understanding the scope of what it's going to do. It's not a good infrastructure bill because it's partisan bait and switch. And we really want to remind folks across the state of Texas, it's not good for everyday Texans. Now, Congresswoman, would you encourage constituents or anybody here in the state of Texas, how they can make their voice heard, how they can be productive with their representative to make sure that we promote better policies in Washington, D.C.?
Well, these decisions are made by the votes. First and foremost, when we elect people who tell you up front what they're trying to do, listen to them. And we heard all throughout the Biden campaign that these were things that they were going to do. They were talked about open borders. They talked about increasing taxes. Our foreign policy has gone out the window. So it starts at the ballot box and making sure everybody goes to vote. After that, make sure that your Congress members, that your elected officials are hearing from you. What are the projects that you hold most dear? What are the issues, the priorities that you want us to work on? What are your expectations out of a Congress member? Because I'll tell you, the people who we typically hear from are people who need our help, demand our help, want our help. They want more government intervention, not not the latter, where we were looking for ways of empowering people and making people more independent, giving them more control over their lives. So, if the only people that we're hearing from in a representative form of government is people who are calling in asking for more help, that's the longer you're in Congress, the longer that's what you're going to hear. Now, look, I was told my first day in office during freshman orientation that you should treat this job like you're the mayor of your district. And, I feel like I have a little bit of practice in that. So I get out. I mean, every single time we're not voting, I'm home. And I am meeting with our constituents here. I've got an open door policy. I encourage people, and we're doing roundtables. We're getting out and about in the community. But it's really important that people engage, find opportunities to be able to have your voice heard. Number one place is going to be at the ballot box, but also make sure that you're registering people to vote. These issues are way too important to just let one day fly by, you vote, and then you go away. Keep working at it. Find constituents that are willing to run for election and support them, or you yourself run for election. It's not easy. You have to have a thick backbone, thick skin, and you have to have a strong backbone. Be able to defend your policies, and you're going to disagree with somebody, at least once, many more times than that, probably. But understand why you have the principles that you have and be able to defend them. But engaging, I think, is the most important part of what we can expect, and all of us can do that. All of us have the time to be able to do that.
Well, that's what we really encourage folks to do as a grassroots organization. We're nonprofit, nonpartisan. We want to be making sure that Texans are involved in the process, and it should be bipartisan. And we should really agree across the board that more spending is not the right answer. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, and we do need to take care of the things that need to be taken care of, like our roads and bridges. But it should be targeted. It shouldn't be expansive. But we really want to thank you, Representative Van Duyne, for sitting down with us today. The Texans in the district and across the state could hear from you. Thank you so much. And do you have any parting words that you'd like to share with folks?
Well, I just want to appreciate you giving me the opportunity to visit with more people across the state, more people across the country. It has been a humbling experience the last few months. As a freshman coming in during COVID, it's been a different experience. But we have a great freshman class of people, all of us coming in with different experience levels, having that new renewed energy, new ideas. And I think you're going to see a lot coming out of this class, and the expectations should be great. I think we'll be able to meet them.
That's awesome to hear. Well, let's defeat this infrastructure bill. Let's do what's right for America, and let's promote some better policies going forward. I think we can all agree upon that. We want more opportunity in this country. Thank you again, and thank you to all those who tuned in.